The United States and the Islamist Taliban militia are blaming each other for the collapse of Afghan peace talks after Donald Trump abruptly canceled a planned secret summit with the insurgents near Washington. The two sides had been holding weeks of lower-level talks in Doha to seek an end to Afghans' decades of conflict. Now, Trump broke off those talks after a U.S. soldier was killed in a Taliban attack over the weekend.
The body of an American soldier returns home. Sergeant Ellis Barreto Ortiz was the 16th U.S. service member killed in Afghanistan this year. One of a dozen people who died when a Taliban car bomb exploded on Thursday near the U.S. Embassy in Kabul. That inspired President Trump to tweet an unexpected announcement.
The major Taliban leaders and the president of Afghanistan were going to secretly meet with me on Sunday. Unfortunately, in order to build false leverage, they admitted to an attack in Kabul that killed one of our great soldiers. I immediately canceled the meeting and called off peace negotiations.
It has been 18 years since the U.S. invaded Afghanistan after the September 11th attacks on New York City by its ally, al-Qaeda. Thousands of coalition troops have died, as well as tens of thousands of Afghan troops and civilians. Afghanistan's government has been critical of the negotiations between the U.S. and the Taliban, which have largely sidelined Afghan officials. A spokesman welcomed Trump's announcement.
We think that there was an opportunity for the Taliban to embrace a political life. They failed to do so, and they continued violence while they were talking to the U.S. envoy in Qatar. And we didn't see any commitment by the Taliban for any peace process, except talking and then, continuing to kill Afghans and our partners.
Meanwhile, the Taliban said the decision will harm the U.S. more than anyone else, but seemed to leave the door open to more talks. Trump has pledged to withdraw the remaining 14,000 U.S. troops from Afghanistan. But he faces resistance from the government in Kabul, as well as from some U.S. lawmakers who say it's too early to leave the Afghans on their own.
Let's get more on this story now. We are joined by DW's Sandra Petersman, who has been following the latest developments. And, as we heard there, the Taliban actually reacted to this, saying that canceling the peace talks would harm the United States more than anyone else. What exactly do they mean by that? Is that a threat?
I would say yes, definitely it is a threat. They just carry on fighting. As we speak now, Sarah, there are serious clashes in two northern provinces of Afghanistan. So the war hasn't stopped while the negotiations were on. And now we can see an even bigger uptick in violence in Afghanistan. And the threat is, look, we are ready to fight probably longer than you do.
This is quite a turnaround, especially bearing in mind the fact that the Trump administration said that it was on the verge of reaching a deal in these talks. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo underlined that again. I just want to have a listen to what he said and then get your reaction thereafter.
We were making real progress towards that. We had a commitment from the Taliban to make a formal public announcement that they would break with al-Qaeda, something that an American demand that had gone back as far as President Bush. We were making progress along the way. President Trump was supportive of those efforts.
So how close were they really?
I think they were really very close on the threshold, an agreement in principle. Those were the words of the special negotiator of the United States. And then there was this last-minute turnaround, President Trump looking for a grand gesture in Camp David. But that was called off very last minute. And as it is emerging now, probably because of rifts within his own administration, Secretary Pompeo being of a different opinion than the National Security Advisor Bolton, who seems to be against any kind of deal with the Taliban.
Given that internal dynamic, I mean, we have this campaign president from U.S. President Donald Trump saying that he will withdraw American troops from Afghanistan as soon as possible. Realistic at this point?
I never thought that was a realistic goal. I think it's a bad idea to rush into any kind of peace negotiations because you are wanting to keep a campaign promise. We should look at realities on the ground in Afghanistan, and that is basically trying to solve a conflict 18 years with U.S. involvement. But if you look at Afghanistan as a whole, we look at 4 decades of conflict. It's really rather complicated in Afghanistan, and rushing out seems to be a really bad idea.
No easy solutions indeed. DW's Sandra Petersman, thank you.